this doesn't fall. If you'll even be able to see me here. I feel like I did a whole thing with these lights. I don't know, we can edit this. I'm doing a little guided meditation and putting stuff together and really trying to trust this part of me that's making a bunch of different connections. And I really think what's happening is that I'm developing a sort of series of really good algorithms for almost controlled disassociation, which is just pure association. I can sort of see in a fourth dimensional way consciousness, and it looks like it's putting something together, much like writing or sculpting, but sculpting like a shape that's meant to be experienced one slice at a time, which again is funny. Which way does time flow is an interesting question. Brian Greene, The Fabric of the Cosmos, Chapter 6, Chance and the Arrow. It's all about what can we know about the direction of time and time itself mathematically and scientifically. Is there a way to objectively, say, watch a video of an event and tell which direction time is happening? And turns out that you can basically reverse any event, including, say, an egg rolling off, as Brian Greene puts it, and hitting the ground, cracking, and going into pieces and just splattering all over the place. If you could coordinate it, you could ripple energy right on back up backwards and throw all the pieces and have the right amounts of energy in there that fuse them back together, and they would just click. It's possible, and given an infinite amount of time, in fact, it's almost unreasonable that it wouldn't happen, because it's possible. And that's sort of laws of quantum physics. You want to get a good idea of that, check out Michio Kaku. He has a great way of being able to take huge ideas in ways that are easily understood. But brings us back to probabilities and chance and the arrow and entropy, which is the tendency noticed in thermodynamics for systems to tend to always go the whole system from a higher sense of order or low entropy to a higher sense of disorder or low entropy. I think that's how it is. But from higher order to lower order, or from more together, more ordered to more chaotic. And the more chaotic something is, like on a molecular level, that's it's easy to imagine that it's just simply heat. And thermodynamics most governs engines, but the interesting thing about that is you can order things, and you do this by making ice cubes. You use energy and power to create something that cools. Actually, you produce a lot of heat, producing a cool liquid, which then you run next to the water, and you suck the heat out of it, and you redistribute it. You throw it out, and that just creates a ton of extra heat, in the house, in the world, and that's a whole lot of extra disorder, a lot more entropy, and so the tendency of things to go from one to the other, although you can have something like that where you So it's very confusing because all these thoughts are so connected. Um, it makes somehow sense to say if you see a glass of water with ice cubes in it at 10 p.m., then it's likely that they will be melted by a certain amount of time, which is they will go from cooler, more structured, more order, to more chaos. And Brian Greene also uses, and I think other people have used, a huge book, War and Peace, which is a highly ordered system. Um, if you unbind it and throw it up in the air, and it all falls back down, what's the chances it's going to land one page on top of the other in exactly the right order? It's very small. And so the question is it ease and difficulty that cause things to fall into the same places, that shift around and make a direction? And of course, how do we know this? Well, we have to remember it, and that's the part of consciousness where you sort of have this moment you think of as the now flowing through, and flowing with that wave somehow is human consciousness, and it does this by sensing. That's fun. Suction cup stuff is so much fun. But I'm doing mostly this for my own edification anyways, but so you got this moment that you think is time, the sort of the now. It's not really the now, because it's really a chunk of time. It's like in photography, you're taking a 1/25th of a second or a whole bunch of 1/25ths of a second, and so your consciousness is kind of sensing the stuff that's coming, or the stuff that's happening, but it's sort of sitting up here and doing the sensing. At least it feels that way. It's really right back here, and it's already got a narrative, so it's already got a thing that's happening, and what's happening is based on what just happened. Well, how do you know what just happened? We have to remember it. So what are memories? Memories are little collections of molecules in atoms, which all those tiny little pieces, like a DNA molecule having to be in exactly the right spot, exactly where you left them. That means entropy works too with memory. It's less and less reliable. This includes any type of memory, geological memory, astronomical memory, the light that comes from billions of years ago, billions of light years away. All that is kind of memory that is less and less ordered as you go backwards, just like it is when you go forwards. And I keep thinking it's something like a highway, or the brain is something like a probability machine. And I kind of think it probably runs back and forth. I think when it's running in this direction, it's changing things a little bit. And then it sort of meets that feeling of that's too far to think about. And I think it turns around and goes back. And it starts to do that. And we remember it in this direction, a story, as memory. Just like when we go in this direction, we remember the details back as the past. And it's funny because you say, well, that's weird, because it's like, what is that illusion of a story? People say, well, is choice and is free will an illusion? Well, on some level it can't be, because you just asked the question. And somehow it seems appropriate for me to say that the question asked itself. When I get honest with myself, and I just sort of use the language that feels appropriate to me, I think history I really hate these stupid section cups. I think somehow that the consciousness just emerges on one level on top of the other, and it's a story that somehow like we've sort of chosen to do, or that we're writing. Much in the same way that when you read a book, just like War and Peace, as an example of entropy and consciousness and choice and free will and a lot of these other concepts that I try you have to incorporate all in one thing, and I'm trying to sort of set them all up around and see what's inside of all of those details, what machine is giving off these types of fumes and is giving these noises off here and is causing these vibrations down here. I was afraid this thing is just about to fall. And so, really hate shoddy engineering. It's very distracting. This is a problem with the big thoughts. It's hard to keep all those together. As the patterns emerge, as the narrative emerges, stories, free will, narratives, a book, War and Peace. So I have to reboot systems up here because this is like, it's stuff I push closer and closer and closer to for years. Trying to visualize some of this stuff. When you think about the character in your favorite book, I've often felt like Charles Wallace from A Wrinkle in Time. Who's Charles Wallace? Well, he's that character. Is he conscious? No. Why do you relate to him? Where is his story being told? Where is his consciousness? Well, it's two places. More. It's two places. It's in more than two people. It sort of is Charles Wallace because that's the story. You say it's his story, but it's really a story. It's a story that's been written by an author, and the author who themselves were the consciousness, who initially are the consciousness that take the parts of themselves. And I like to write. I want to be a writer. So I think about it like that because I can see that story, like the whole story, and I can see it because it's supposed to be experienced one moment after the other, one detail, one word, one thought, one association. And so it's that story, and it's also the story that you read in your mind and the associations that you make, and it's the stories that are happening in other people's minds whenever they read the story. So it's a lot of them. So what happens to the character when Charles Wallace dies? Which I'm not saying he dies. But assuming all things die and the universe ends in whichever way, the interesting thing about Charles Wallace is that both the author, and I'm sure I'm disconnected because I'll get to that too. One of the reasons I feel like I've got so many stories going on, that I'm a hive mind to some degree. Differential, maybe, I don't know. I like to refer it as controlled chaos. You get to a state of entropy that is sustained. But anyways, so does Charles Wallace have any choice in the matter? No. No, he doesn't. But the consciousnesses that are experiencing the story do. They have the choice at any point to pull out. The author even has the choice to how to write it. Which I know I sort of, I just got a message from the Diary of a Broken Little childlike empress, clever as fuck. But it's sort of the reveal of a never-ending story, right? There's one story and another story, and I didn't come to it because of that. I came to sort of these things because it's sort of a model that works in between all these other details that don't seem to make any sense. Um, but it also explains a little bit about the ideas of God and characters and stories and what souls could be. Uh, for instance, how could a God ever communicate? How could the author ever communicate um, with a member of their story? How could a God ever communicate? How could an author ever tell a story to a character they were writing? Well, the only way to do that is to become one of the characters, which you already were. So it doesn't really work. Um, and the people who are reading the book are also, they have a choice. They've already chosen to trust the author and to have the experience, hopefully to the end, right? Because we don't really like people that skip out on the story early. It sucks. Somehow it's wrong in a way we can't describe, and it fits here too. Um, so something about all of us being somehow in different stories or different parts of different stories, and yet we're all flowing through time at the same rate. Uh, which, as far as I can tell, the story that's happening is the only thing that time is. I think consciousness is time, because it's the only thing that's happening at any particular rate. Everything else is just happening at a rate relative to something else, um, or relative to no particular thing at all. Um, and I just keep coming back to that because there are some ways to find truths. There's some ways to go into this sort of story mode, and it's like edit. And then, of course, what do we want to do as humans? First chance we get, we want to be storytellers. Um, we learn we can tell stories. We learn we can lie. We learn we have to discern the truth. We have to, like anything, navigate perception, sensation, judgment, consequence, action, reaction, meaning, purpose. Some of these altered states, I think that they're just like dreams. They're just associations. And, the brain, I think anything that is pattern really just borrows from other parts of patterns. And somewhere in the brain, something that says cat is a collection of categories that something sort of does and doesn't fit. It's like a lion versus a pet cat versus uh, perhaps a stuffed cat, or maybe a dog dressed as a cat. These things are strange categories, and they're mentalese. They're mental images. They're patterns. They're weighted gates. And at some point, the very base pattern is just the word or the feeling, the sensation that you get, and it really can't be described in any other way. Um, but I have trouble with memory, I think, because I'm accessing so much, and I really don't have the processing. I have processing speed, but I don't have like memory to store all the things that keep popping up and running through. Uh, and I'm very tired. It's 2:30, which is the best time for a dentist appointment. But I just trying to think of consciousness flowing and thinking what is important to the story, and that the story and the perspective of this story is me, and I am the universe, and I am somehow poking around in my own head, and I'm telling a story, and I'm making a story, and I'm reading stories, and all these little narratives happening, and I have no idea what's happening. I only know that I want to be here to help.